Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing another episode of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. This will be part 237, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and you compare them to the, talk about the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got quite a cool assortment of animals, as we usually do, but we got Great Cakes mod pretty much dominating this one. Some very interesting endangered animals, some more common ones, and mostly some extinct animals too. So I think quite a cool variety. So we're going to get started off with a Great Cakes mod. We have got here the spectacled hare-wallaby. So let's have a look at these guys here. They're very, very cute, I think. So this is the spectacled hare-wallaby, or Lagocectus conspicualis, or something like that. These guys are a species of macropod, or, kangaroos, wallabies, those kind of animals, those marsupials, found in Australia and New Guinea. Well, these guys aren't found in New Guinea. In Australia, there's a small population found on Barrow Island, but the mainland population is quite widespread, though it is in decline in northern parts of their range. A species of Lagoceros, the hare-wallaby, are small members of the macropods, so they're quite a small member of the kangaroo family. And very cute. Is that a juvenile? Or no, that's an adult. I think that's just a small adult. The spectacled hare-wallaby is found across northern Australia in tropical tussock and spinifex habitats. It can be found in Queensland to Western Australia. In 1997, though, it was discovered in the savanna country of southwest Papua New Guinea in the upper Bishak River. So that's quite interesting. It was found in New Guinea. It is a solitary, nocturnal herbivore, and is considerably larger than a lot of its relatives, which is very interesting. It is coloured grey-brown with golden tips and an orange circle around its eye, where it gets its name, so it looks like it's got glasses, it's spectacled. It builds a nest among tough vegetation, and when disturbed, it hops off in a zigzag manner. The young are produced singly and at any time of the year, and they become sexually mature at about a year of age. So you can see it's an adult there. That's very, very cute how he's sleepy. Let's see if we can find another one. Let's see if we can find a baby. There's an adult. We want to have a look at the baby. Because the baby's very cute. So the species name comes from John Gold, naming the hare-wallaby Lagocectus conspilia, and provide an illustration of the mammals of Australia. A separate species was also described, but is now considered a subspecies of the population. A subpopulation of same species, and sometimes considered subspecies, but not too often. It's called Lichahadi. Luholtz refers to this animal as a kangaroo rat, even though that common name actually is referred to, the mouse, the actual rat rodent from North America. So in terms of these guys, they were reviewed by the Red List that they are a species of less concern. The subspecies itself is restricted to Barrow Island, but it was once found throughout the Montebello Islands. Predation by introduced species and development on the island has led to its vulnerable status. Let's say the mainland subspecies, once regarded near threatened, so that's what I think is the mainland subspecies, is once regarded as threatened status. The population of the species has been declined, largely due to reduction in habitat through land clearing. Concerns do also exist around the disappearance from arid parts of its far northern range. The reintroductions into former habitats have been proposed following the related Western Shield projects. So this guy's a spectacled hare-wallaby was discovered in Queensland dating up to 11,000 years ago, so it was still quite common, like around the Pleistocene and into the early Holocene. And it's also known as the Bidji people of the Western Armenian land, as it's called Wallara. So that's its other sort of name. And let's figure out how actually big it is. We'll probably have to look in the Zoopedia for that one. Zoopedia, really cool. So quite large, about 66 centimeters long, lives for about 8 years, that seems pretty spot on, and 3 kilos. So that's quite big for these guys. So really, really cool. Love to see some more marsupials. And we've got another closely related one next to us, so we're going to be carrying on with another Great Cakes mod. This one here is called the Rufous hare-wallaby, or also known as the Marla. So this is quite a cool one. I don't know what's going up with you. Something's happened with you. There must be a morph or something. Something's happened there. Anyway, we've got plenty of good looking ones. So here we go. So this is the Rufous hare-wallaby. Same genus. It's Haristus, is also known as the Marla or the Wurrup. These guys are another small species of macropod found in Australia. It was formerly widely distributed across the western half of the continent, But naturally, current populations are now confined to Bonaire Island and Dore Island off Western Australia. So it was found, more west than these guys. Um, Although once widespread in the central and western deserts, predation by feral cats and foxes and destructive wildfires caused the last wild population on the mainland Australia to go extinct in the early 1990s. Despite being extinct in the wild, the mainland subspecies actually still persists in captivity. This species, which currently is classified as vulnerable, has rufous grey hair and is actually, we got the largest, but this is the smallest hare-wallaby. This weighs between 800 and 1600 grams, so between 800 grams and 1.6 kilos. It is solitary by nature and is also nocturnal, and it feeds on herbs, leaves, and seeds. Mala prefer spinifex sandplain habitats, and they build burrows using large spinifex hummocks. The burrows are tunnel-like structures with a spinifex roof, and these provide a cool refuge during the heat of the day. In summer, they're likely to dig deeper burrows to withstand the searing desert temperatures. So captive stock of the mainland subspecies is currently being reintroduced into the Tamani Desert of the Northern Territory, and in July 2019, the first reintroduction into the New Haven Sanctuary was conducted, with the release of 30 individuals over a 9,400 hectare feral predator-free area. Animals from both Bonaire Island and Dura Island have recently been translocated to Dirk Halog Island following the complete removal of livestock and feral cats from the local environment. So that's quite cool. More places for Mala to live, can't have too much Mala. So taxonomy, first described by John Gould in Mammals Australia. 4 distinct populations of the species have been described as subspecies, especially when regard to their conservation status. Estimates of these island colonies were between 4,300 and 6,700 in 1994. So the main subspecies, Lagotis restricted. So these are an extinct group that were restricted to mainland southwest Australia. And the type was used in the first description of specimen by John Gould in 1844 and was considered found in York, Western Australia. 2 possible subspecies have also been restricted to islands. So Bonaire is found on Bonaire Island and Dore is found on Dora Island. And there's also unnamed subspecies that has been considered by a relocation. So it was originally discovered in the Tamani Desert and was once widespread across the arid centre of Australia. The only existing member of this group or proposed subspecies have been translocated to several sites such as New Haven, Tullamore Island, Shark Bay and Dryer Woodland. And they kind of be estimated to be about 1,000 individuals, so it's quite interesting. I think there's a bug going on with these ones, but don't worry, that's fine. We're allowed to have bugs. There's a species of Lagoceros, which is the smallest in its genus. The combined length and body of 310 to 390 millimeters, greater than the tail length of 245 to 300 millimeters. So not quite long, just over a foot long, and then the tail's about a foot long as well, so 2 feet. Their weight's about 800 to 600 grams, and their body form is comparatively light and delicate. The coloration of the pelt is rufous overall, greyer on the upper back and yellowish on the upper side and forearms. In some parts of the population, such as the Bonaire Islands and Dora Islands, they have greyer fur on the underside. A sandy colour on the tail terminates into a grey tip, and the fur is quite long and shaggy in appearance, as you can kind of see going on there. Significance to Aboriginal culture. For the Aragu, or Aboriginal people, the Mala or Hare-wallaby people were important ancestral beings. For tens of thousands of years, the Mala has watched over from the rocks and caves and walls, guiding them on their relationships with people, plants and animals, rules for living and caring for the country. Mala Tribasha, or the Mala law, is central to their culture and celebrated in stories, song, dance and ceremonies. So these little guys, like I said, are quite important in the local cultures. Because remember, Australia's a big place. All our Aborigines probably had quite different customs around the place. Very, very cool. Alright, next up. This one's not done by Great Cakes Mod this time. This one is done by Jen, if you remember Jen back in the day, Leaf, and remastered by Gaboy. We have got the tufted deer, so we can have a look at these guys here. So, as we mentioned, he's gone for a remaster. So, the tufted deer, or Eladophus cephalaphus, or something like that, is a small species of deer characterized by its prominent tuft of black hair on its forehead and its fang-like canines in these males, which is quite fun as well. It is a close relative of the muntjac, living somewhere further north over a wide area of central China and northeastern Myanmar. Suffering from overhunting and habitat loss, this deer is considered near threatened and is the only member of its genus. So there have been 4 subspecies described, but a lot of them we really don't know about their actual distribution, or if they're actually genuine subspecies. But there has been 4 proposed. I'm not going to go into them. So the tough deer is very similar to a muntjac in appearance. It has a longer neck and legs, which gives it a leaner appearance. Its coat is coarse with short and stiff hairs, being almost black in winter and chocolate brown in the summer. The lips, tip of the ears, and undersides of the tail is white, and there's a tuft of horseshoe-shaped hair present on the forehead and upper neck that can be brown and black, where it gets its name, and can be up to 17 centimeters or 6.7 inches in length. Perhaps its most striking feature of this deer is its fang-like canines. So these canines can grow up to about 2.6 centimeters long, or longer in some rare cases, so just over an inch. They're also quite a small deer, but they're still larger than most muntjac species. They stand about 50 to 70 centimeters tall, or about 20 to 28 inches at the shoulder, and weigh between 17 and 30 kilograms, or 37 to 66 pounds. The tail is quite short, about 10 centimeters, or about 3.9 inches long. And the antlers, you can see, are only present in the males, and it's extremely short, and it's almost hidden by the hair. So that's quite interesting. Let's see if we can find a female and have a look at her. So you can see that's what the female looks like. Quite cute, actually. So, the tough deer is found mainly in China, where it occurs from eastern coast to eastern Tibet. It is absent from the extreme south of the country. There are old records of this species in northeastern Myanmar, but recent surveys have failed to find it, and possibly due to lack of surveys on their preferred habitat. So they may be down there, but we don't really know. So tough deer are highly distributed animals where it overlaps in its distribution, and the other species, like the sandbar. It inhabits high, damp forests between 500 and 4,500 meters, or 1,600 to 14,800 feet above sea level, close to the tree line. It is found in both evergreen and deciduous forests, with extensive undercover and nearby freshwater supply in places like the Gunana Mountain National Nature Reserve. In this area, the plants and trees change the higher you go in altitude. That means the plants at the lower part of the mountain are mostly subtropical, and the ones the higher parts are those that can survive the cold, harsh conditions such as snow. The tufted deer's preference for mountain forests emphasizes its ability to live in regions with different temperature variations. Additionally, the availability of salt licks is also a positive factor to the presence of these animals. This deer is able to withstand minor human disturbances, as is occasionally found on cultivated land. So that's very cool. Let's have a look at the little babies. Because we talk about reproduction. So the tufted deer is mainly solitary or found in pairs. It is crepuscular and travels fixed routes through its territory, which is vigorously defended by the males. It is a timid animal and prefers places with good cover where it can camouflage. It can easily be disturbed, and when alarmed, it will let out a bark before fleeing, moving in cat-like jumps. The mating season occurs between September and December, and during which long barks males make could easily be heard. The gestation period lasts for about 6 months, and a litter of 1 to 2 babies are born in the late spring and early summer. The young become sexually mature at about 1 to 2 years of age and can live about 10 to 12 years in the wild. The mating system for these deer are polygamous, which leads male to fighting over mates. Male tufted deer are also known to fight over territory to show dominance. When fighting, their main weapon is the elongated canines, but they also use their antlers sometimes, but they're not as dangerous as their canines, They look like saber-toothed cats. So they're a herbivorous species, feeding mainly on leaves and twigs and fruits and different types of vegetation, and they're considered both grazers and browser, which means they feed on both grass and other types of food. So we'll have a look a little bit at you running around and other types of vegetation. So they are considered near threatened. And surveys from 1998 put the estimate population between 300,000 to 500,000 individuals, though a substantial ongoing decline is almost certain. Overharvesting from large animals in China is a serious threat not only to the species. The hide of this deer is actually fairly high in textile material, especially after the vigorous conservation efforts made on other more endangered species. So habitat loss is also an issue in a relatively developing country, and in China the species is listed as provisionally protected species in many places, but not protected by the national law. It occurs in other protected areas. More surveys need to be done on this poorly known species for effective protection. The tufted deer is part of the Yellow Species Survival Plan, programmed by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, because it cannot maintain 90% diversity for 10 generations. To prevent gene diversity continue dropping, the program plans to work on ex situ populations by increasing the number of exhibit places in zoos and make sure the animals can breed. Prior to this, the tufted deer population was also decreasing in captivity due to lack of interest in the species, even though captive breeding has greatly helped conserve the species by facilitating interbreeding and gene diversity. So that's quite cool. Very, very cute. I am a big fan of these guys. Another cool little deer. So thank you, Jen, Leaf, and Gaboy for doing the work on that one. So that's a re-raster. We've covered that guy before, but very, very cool back in the day. So the rest of these mods are all done by Grey Cakes Mods. So that's going to be very interesting to go through. So next one up, we have got the Tamaraw. A very, very interesting animal. Also called the Mindoro Dwarf Buffalo. So let's have a look at you there. Is that the male or a female? That's a female. Let's find the male. There he is. He's having a sleepy sleep, I think. There we go. Don't worry about you. So this is called the Tamaraw or the Mindoro Dwarf Buffalo or Barbarus mindorensis. These guys are a small buffalo in the family Bovidae. Not surprising. It is endemic to the island of Mindoro in the Philippines and the only endemic Philippine bovine. It is believed, however, to have once lived in the nearby island of Luzon. These guys were originally found throughout Mindoro, from the coast to over 2,000 meters above sea level, but because of human hunting and habitat loss, it is now restricted to a few remote grassy plains and is considered critically endangered. Contrary to popular belief and past classification, they are not a subspecies of the water buffalo, nor is it a subspecies of the slightly larger Carambayo, which is classified as a subspecies of the water buffalo. In contrast to the capybara, the Carabayo, the Tamaraw has a number of distinguished features, being slightly hairier, has light markings on its face. It's not gregarious, so it doesn't like living in groups. It has shorter horns that are somewhat V-shaped, and is also the second largest native mammal in the country after the Carabayo, which is a subspecies of the water buffalo. So the presence of these islands coupled with the discovery of fossil bovids or barbavas on other islands on the archipelago, suggests that the species or relatives, these kind of dwarf buffaloes, were found all across the Philippines. And in fact, fossils finds in the 20th century show that these guys were once found on the northern Philippines island of Luzon during the Pleistocene. As a member of the family Bovidae, the Tamaraw's close affinity with water buffalo has been validated many times in the past, and it was once considered a subspecies of it, but recent genetic analyses kind of decided to put them as their own thing. So, entomology, the Tamaraw was originally an Anoa modorensis by French paleozoologist Pierre Hernandez in 1888, but then it was put into its, bulbous, or bulbous, so it is closely related to those guys. We think the name, the Tamaraw, may have come from Tamador, which was actually the alternative name for the bantang. So, very cool guy. So, this guy just looks like a little, cow. Typical member of its family. It's a compact, heavy-set bovid with 4 legs and that end in cloven hooves. A small horned head at the end of a short neck. It's actually quite smaller and stockier than the water buffalo. And little sexual dimorphism is actually seen in this species, although males are reported to have thicker necks. So the Tamaraw is typical shoulder height of about 100 to 105 centimeters, or 39 to 41 inches, just over a meter tall, and length of about 7 feet 2 inches, or about 2.2 meters, with a tail adding a further 60 centimeters, not 60 meters, 24 inches. Reported weights are between 180 to 300 kilograms, or between 400 and 660 pounds. So it's about the same size like a tapir. So very, very interesting that they, great example of island dwarfism. So adults have dark brown to greyish colours and more hair than the water buffalo. Its limbs, you can see, are quite short and stocky. While markings are seen in the hooves and the inner lower forelegs, and the markings are quite similar to those of the Anoa. The face is the same colour as the body, and most of the members of the species have grey-white stripes that begin at the inner corner of the eye to the horns. The nose and lips have black skin. The ears are about 13.5 centimeters, or about 5 inches long, with a notch on the tip and with white markings on the insides. So you can see there's one female that's got this going on. You can see that white pattern there. That's what you can see going on. And there's a bit of variety, obviously, in this one. And it's actually, this, I'll just give it an aside, this is actually a custom model from Great Cakes Mods. So great job on completely creating something from scratch. I'm very, very impressed. Both sexes do grow short black horns in a V-shaped manner compared to the very C-shaped ones on the water buffalo. These horns are also quite flat and are triangular at the base. And due to regular rubbing, the Tamaroa's horns have a worn-out surface, but rough inner surfaces. So it's smooth out here, rough in here. The horns are reported to be about 35.5 to 51 centimeters in length, or about 14 to 20 inches. So in terms of distribution, they were first documented in 1888 on the island of Mindoro, and before 1900, most people avoided the setting on Mindoro because of a virulent strain of malaria. However, as anti-malarial medicine was developed, more people settled on the island. This increase in human activity drastically reduced the Tamaroa's population. By 1966, the Tamaroa's range was reduced to 3 areas: Mount Ilgit or Mount Cavadel, and areas near the Sabian Penal settlement. By 2000, their range was further reduced to only 2 areas: the Mounts Iglit Bako National Park and Arakan. Initial estimates of the population of Mindoro was estimated to be about 10,000 in the early 1900s. Less than 50 years later, it has diminished in 1949 to about 1,000 individuals, and by 1953, fewer than 250 were alive. The population estimates continued to grow smaller until the IUCN publication of the 1969 Red Data Book noted that it was likely below 100. The head count rose to about 120 animals in 1975, and current estimates for the wild Tamaroa population are between 30 to 200 individuals, so actually quite endangered. So let's have a look at the biology and life history. So let's find another one over here. We'll have a look at you, because you look quite pretty there, miss. Oh, that's Mr. We'll carry on looking at you. So as a rare endemic mammal on a relatively secluded island, the ecology of the Tamaroa is relatively unknown, but individuals of the species are reclusive and shy away from humans. In addition, the small size of the species subpopulation, already spread thin throughout their fragmented range, make contact with any more than a solitary individual a rarity. So seeing a bunch of them is quite rare. So these guys prefer tropical highland forested areas, and is typically found in thick bush near open canopied glades. This is where it may feed on grass. Since human habitation and subsequent forest fragmentation on their home island of Mindoro, their habitat preference has somewhat expanded to lower altitude grassy plains. And within their mountainy environments, they usually are not found far from a source of water. In terms of their ecology, they are a grazer, and they feed on grasses and young bamboo shoots. And although this is known to prefer colgan grass and wild sugarcane, typically that's kind of their preferences, they are naturally diurnal, feeding during the daytime hours. However, daytime human activities have recently forced select populations to become nocturnal to avoid human contact. So in terms of life history, we're going to have a look at the cute little babies. They're all sleeping. How cute is that? So the Tamaroa is known to live for about 20 years, with an estimated lifespan of about 25. The adult female Tamaroa gives birth to 1 offspring after a gestation of 300 days. The interbirth period is about 2 years, although 1 female has been sighted with 3 juveniles. That's very impressive. The calf stays for 2 to 4 years with its mother before becoming independent. So let's carry on. In terms of their, compared to their sociality, compared to the closely related water buffalo, they are solitary. Adults of this species don't occur in herds or smaller packs, and are often encountered alone. Only juveniles exhibit the typical bovine herding behavior and clan hierarchy seen in water buffaloes. Males and females are known to associate all year round, but these interactions only last a few hours. This solitary behavior may be an adaptation to its forest environment, since most forest animals tend to be a little bit less social. This solitary behavior, I've already covered that. Adult males are often solitary and act apparently aggressive, while adult females can be alone, accompanied by a bull or their young of different ages. Similar to other bovines, they wallow in mud pits mainly to avoid biting insects. And reports of aggression when cornered are substantiated. Their threat pose involves lowering their head and shifting their horns into a vertical position, accompanied by head shaking. So it's kind of say, hey, leave me alone, mate. Let's see if we can find one standing up. Is it the other one? Yeah, the other one's standing up. We'll have a look at you, little mate. Okay, so being entirely an endemic and rare land mammal, the tamarau is an incredibly vulnerable species. As I mentioned, it's considered critically endangered by the IUCN and has been considered that since 2000. Awareness of the conservation status began in 1965, where it was classified by the IUCN, and then it was endangered, and through sequence surveys, it was actually found, and oh no, there's actually a lot more worse than we thought. It's kind of worse, and then it kind of kept declining. And in 2000, the tamarau was relisted under the most severe C1, or critically endangered. This is due to estimates of the population decline of nearly 5 years, with 20% in 5 years, or within the time span of 2 generations. Many factors have contributed to the decline of the tamarau. That includes increase in human population, with giving rid of the habitat, less habitat. Also, in the 1930s, the introduction of non-native cattle caused a severe Rundapest endemic, which really impacted the tamarau population. Hunting for tamarau's for food and subsistence has also taken a toll, but the most major factor has been habitat loss due to infrastructure development, logging, and agriculture. And this has reduced their population to be less than 300 by 2007. So it was probably thousands by the early 1900s. But due to the decline, various Philippine laws and organisations have been created to conserve the species. In 1936, the Commonwealth Act No. 73 was enacted by the then Philippine Commonwealth, which prohibits any hunting, killing, or wounding these guys in the accepted note of self-defense. So if you're protecting yourself from an angry tamarau, which is very unlikely, but I still think that's a fair reason, protect your life from a tamarau, or for scientific purposes, which is also fair. The penalties were harsh and included a hefty fine and imprisonment. In 1979, an executive order was signed to create a committee specifically geared towards the conservation of the tamarau, as it considered a source of national pride. The organisation actually also successfully bred a tamarau nicknamed Kali in 1999. It was bred in captivity too. In 2001, the Republic Act 1147 of the Wildlife Resources Conservation and Protection Act enacted to protect the tamarau and other endemic species from hunting and for sale. And during the time, the gene pool was established by preserving the tamarau's numbers. However, this project was not successful, and only one offspring named Kali was produced. As of 2011, Kali is the only surviving animal in the gene pooling project. The project was also not improved, but the project's Protected Areas and Wildlife Bureau solved that the tamarau's were already breeding in the wild. Cloning was not implemented for conservation, as the Department of Environment and Nature Resources argued that such marriage would diminish the genetic diversity of the species. A small subpopulation of the tamarau's has been found within the confines of the Mgullet Game Refuge and Bird Sanctuary in Mindoro. And as of May 2007, they are listed as Appendix 1 by CITES, which means basically anything to do with them. If you find anything to do with these animals, it's illegal unless you're doing it for scientific reasons as well. So basically, now, in 2002, the Presidential Proclamations 273 set October as the special month for the conservation and protection of the tamarau in Mindoro, and also in April 2019, according to the June Ponenta Tamarau Conservation Program Coordinator, they actually showed there's probably about 466 to 494 tamarau's, which is lower than the 2018 estimate. And the population estimated today, there has been some improvement. The modern estimates for their population kind of ranges from 300 to 500 living tamarau's. They are a quite important animal, though. While they were not heavily exported, they were subject to harvesting for subsistence hunters and stuff like that. And in Philippine culture, they have kind of become a national symbol of the Philippines, even though the Cambarro is kind of the national animal. They have become a little bit famous, In 2004, they made a special working holiday of the Occidental Mindoro for the Tamarau Conservation Month. And also, Toyota released the Toyo Canang as the Tamarau FX, which is an evolution from the Tamarau AUV. So, has some stuff to do with cars and stuff. So that's quite interesting. Very, very cool little animal. Do love a Tamarau. Tamarau. That's how it goes. So, next up, another Great Cakes mod coming up. We've got, this is, what's it? It's really hard to describe name. So this is Impaceratherium. So this is a species of fuzzy rhino. I really love how he's done this one. So these Epiceratherium was an extinct genus of rhinocerid from the mid to late Eocene, Oligocene, and early Miocene from Europe, Asia, and North America. So these guys are one of the first species or genera of rhinos to reach Europe after the Grande Coupiere. This species or this genus was named. Let me just grab one walking around. I think that might be a bit more fun. There you go. So this genus was named of paleontologist Othniel Abel in 1910, with the type of species being Impaceratherium bonesi. And this species is exclusively known from the remains at the Monteville in northern Italy, which dates back to the earliest Oligocene, about 34 million years ago. There's also some other species, but the one this is based on was described in 2025. The species Epiceratherium Itulujuk, which means frosty or frost in Inuit, is actually described in 2025 from remains found in the Hartigan crater on Devon Island in the high Canadian Arctic, which dates to the early Miocene about 24 to 21 million years ago. So these guys were up in the high Arctic, back in the day. It obviously wasn't as cold as it was now. In the Miocene, no ice age, it was probably a bit still warmer, but, you still had to deal with colder weather compared to most other rhinos, which is very, very interesting. While it is sometimes considered a member of Rhinoceridae, so being more closely related to living rhinos than it was to, let's say, Elasmotherium, recent phylogenetic analyses have recovered this guy as quite a basal rhinocerid outside, Alcetotheridae, Elasmoceridae, and crowned rhinoceros. So it's more basal and like an ancestor to, as I mentioned, Elasmotherium and modern rhinos. There's a phylogenetics looking at, this species, or, because, it was added. Let's have a look at you there. Incorporating data from tooth enamel protein sequences, which was actually currently the oldest sequenced proteins, found them as a member of the rhinocerid lineages that came before the rhinocerid and the Elasmotherian split. So it was before those kind of two splits, which I found very interesting. In terms of its description, these guys are quite distinctive from other basal rhinos or rhinocerids by lacking a lower third incisor as well as a lower canine, as well as a number of other characteristics, and like a premolar and molar teeth. Species of this genus lack horns. They don't have horns like modern rhinos, and they were relatively small in comparison to modern rhinos, with some of the other species being estimated between 476 to 736 kilograms, or between 1,000 and 1,600 pounds, and between 372 and 590 kilograms, or 820 to 114 pounds. That's between different species in a 2015 study. And just like modern rhinos, their hind fin had 3 digits, while the forefoot had 4, which is quite unlike modern rhinos, which is very interesting. So yeah, they're quite different. And again, very, very distinct animals. And I really like how Great Case Mod made it a fluffy rhino, and brought it with a new species. So really, really cool. Fluffy Arctic rhino, but not like Elasmotherium because it wasn't, or the woolly rhino because it wasn't necessarily living in those colder habitats. But fuzzy rhinos I do quite enjoy, and it's a very interesting take. I very much enjoy this. Great Cakes Mod, you're always doing an excellent job. Okay, so next up, we've got another extinct animal here. This time we're looking at a species of suid, or what we call a pig. This is Corbanocheirus, I believe how you say that. So you sleeping there, big mate? There you go. We'll let you sleep there. It looks very cool. So these Corbanocheirus is an extinct genus of large, long-legged suid, Artiodactyl, or long-legged pig, from the Miocene of Eurasia and Africa. So it was once assigned, there were other genera such as Lebicocheirus and Megalocopterus were once assigned to this, but they're now considered distinct based on their difference in their dental and minor cranial differences. They also lived with the punitive Parasitothera genus, Casinotherium, from the Caucasus on the basis of four incisors, and then they found that was actually a synonym of the Middle Miocene Carbonactis gigas. So this is the species that we're talking about here. So there are a few different species. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at least. The type is robustus, but we always like to talk about the biggest one, of course, and this is gigas. So this is the largest species, aptly named, Carbonactis bigus, or gigas, not bigus. These guys grew to be about 1 meter in length, or about 3 feet at the shoulder, and weigh up to 500 kilograms, or about 1,100 pounds in life. The heads of these pigs, you can see, are quite unmistakable, so you're actually probably posing quite good for that. They are unmistakable, with a small eyebrow horn and a large horn emanating from the forehead in the males. So it's almost like a unicorn. It is speculated the males would use their forehead horns for jousting with each other. So you can see that's a male there, so that's why we want to have a look at him. You're going to go up and have a little walk, mate? There you go. So you see quite a big boy, very big pig, and long legs for a piggy. So I'm going to say I'm very impressed with how Great Cakes Mod's done this one. I really love how Great Cakes does extinct animals. Some of the best reconstructions of extinct animals I've ever seen, to be honest. And you can see the male there, but the female does not have the same sort of horn. But you can see still quite distinct and very interesting looking. Very big fan. Very, very cool. So, we're going to be finishing off with another Great Cakes mod. Last but certainly not least, we have got Hurricane. So let's have a look at these guys here. So Hurricane is very interesting. So Hurricane is a extinct genus of Angorotherine Hare-wallaby bear from the late Miocene to early Pleistocene, and fossils of it have been found in North America and Eastern Asia. So you're thinking these guys look very much like a short-faced bear, like Arctodus or the Angolotherium. And those are more closely related, as I mentioned, they're the Tremactidae, so they're more closely related to the, spectacled bear from America. And these guys, the species we're talking about, was found in America, but these guys are actually more closely related to the giant panda, so if you mentioned Alopluridae. So unlike the modern relative, the giant panda, which is their closest relative, great example of convergent evolution, and I thought we had to put this here to show you, so you can see the giant panda colours on this guy. But we'll carry on anyway. So Hurricane, even though the modern panda is a bamboo specialist, as believe these guys were hypercarnivorous or omnivorous, and quite adapted for, very similar to the short-faced bears like Arctodus, adapted for walking long distances with these very long legs. So it's a great example, as I mentioned, of convergent evolution. So specimens of Hurricane were originally classified as Angolotherium, or Argotherium, which is a giant short-faced bear from South America. Hunt, 1998, also notices the differences from the carnassials between Angolotherium scolagi and Old World species of genus, but a lot of similarities with A. serengeti and the genus Indoarctos. And then there was a following, further supported by a 2019 publication of a Hendony, which led the authors to look at a comprehensive analysis of Angolotherium specimens and their taxonomy, or panda relatives. And in 2025, a new genus of Hurricane was discovered in Russian, in H. Borneshki. So the genus itself, the Hurricane, was described in 2023. So when Jesco et al. 2023 combined or computed the phylogenetic analysis to see where these guys are related to, they were found Indoarctos to be paraphyletic into the clade containing the genus Hurricane and Angolotherium. So these guys were named as their own genus. So the species we're talking about today, as I mentioned, there's kind of 3 or 4 species. We kind of mentioned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 potential species. The one we're looking at here is H. coffini, which was described by Dalquist in 1986 as a holotype found in Coffee Ranch in Texas. The holotype specimen of this guy is a partial mandible, preserving some molar teeth, and all specimens of the species originally classified those in Angolotherium scolagi, although H. coffey differs by having much larger and longer premolars and molars. That's one way you can sort of tell them apart, which I think is quite interesting. So in terms of description, it's short rostrum, resulting in its increased outforces of its strong jaw muscles. May have been an adaptation for cracking bones with their broad carnassials. So such use of the P4 and M1 teeth suggests has been seen on the teeth of Huracan and also specimens of Arctodacillus, which was the giant short-faced bear. The low relative grinding area of these molars also suggests a carnivorous diet, although the omnivorous spectacled bear also shares these characteristics. So, doesn't mean they were necessarily carnivorous, but it does make sense that it would potentially be doing a bit of both. In terms of its diet, as you mentioned, that carnivorous diet is actually backed up by isotopic analysis. So it wasn't just, look at the teeth, and it was mentioned because, the spectacled bear is a herbivore too. It's mostly herbivore. It's like the American equivalent of the giant panda. The spectacled bear is mostly a herbivore. These guys seem to have a greater adaptation for carnivorous diets than the Arctros, with isotopic analysis from Yepomeda or Chihuahua suggesting a carnivorous diet based on C4 consuming ungulates. So that's, horses and animals that are grazers, horses, cows, stuff like that. Despite this, isotopic data from Opchintica or Oklahoma suggests that Huracan was possibly omnivorous, much like modern bears. So you could, that's varieties within population. I'm sure some populations may have been more carnivorous than others, or they just would have been like modern bears. Just eat what they can. Especially in some areas, there may not be so many large animals to eat, so they're, like the polar bear. Polar bears are especially adapted for hunting marine mammals, but they do eat plants and stuff when they're on land. So yeah, that's the beauty of bears. They're quite generalist. It's just the exact percentage we don't really know. But yeah, I think that's a great place to end the video. I really love these guys. Lots of really cool reconstructions by great cakes mods. A little bit thin in my opinion. I think this body could use a little bit more fluff. But other than that, I think it's pretty spot on. But yes, it is a naturally thin bear. So yeah, I think this is a great place for me to end the video. So first, I'm just going to thank everyone. I'm going to thank, Jen, Leaf, and Gaboy, those three modders, for working on the tufted deer. And I'm going to thank Great Cakes mod, who's knocking it out of the park for every other mod in here. Both the Hare-wallabies, all the Tamaraw, and all those other extinct species like Huracan, Cunobaceras, and Epiceritherium. So very interesting group of animals that you've made today, and very, very cool to see them. So, yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.